The next project I want to share with you is called Torn Paper Collage. And again, I find this a very fun art project, and it uses very easy to find household supplies like magazines, any kind of catalog, junk mail sometimes will work, and glue. So basically, what we're doing in this project is we're learning how to see color differently in our magazines. As we know, we oftentimes flip through magazines and we see these obvious colors of green and yellow and black. And one of the things I ask my students to do sometimes when I'm trying to get them to perceive something in a different way is to turn magazines upside down, because then our brain doesn't automatically identify the image, and instead we see shape and line and color in a different way. So what we're going to do is, there's two different options for this project. We can do it free-form, where we just create some collage of either a self-portrait. This is one that I did of myself of small torn paper, or I did a still life once of flowers in a vase with water, and you could choose, again, a sun, a star, anything that might have multiple colors to it. And basically what we'll do is we will just rip paper. You can't use scissors, but just rip paper and start creating your scene on a piece of background paper simply by gluing it down and creating the object through the use of the color of the magazine page. Another example that's really fun is to take a pre-made outline of a famous work of art. This is Van Gogh's Starry Night, and this is Claude Monet's Sunflowers. And this can be a little bit of an easier start on this project, where we take an already made outline and we kind of fill it in, almost like paint by number. We're going to be filling it in with chips of color that we rip out from the catalog. So let's get started together. So this project is really based on a very old art form called Roman mosaics. And as you can see in these images, in Roman times, artists would take little pieces of tesserae, which were pieces of glass or ceramic, and use them to create a beautiful image. So what we're doing in this project is we're using found objects like magazine pages, and by color, we are ripping out little squares of paper. So right now I'm working on the green for the rolling hills. In order to make your final image look realistic, it's important to choose different shades of a single color. So when I went into my magazine, I was choosing light greens and dark greens, and even actual photographs of rolling hills or grass. Because as you can see here, when you glue them all together in a varied position and layout, you're going to get the overall effect of actual rolling hills. Again, this is about learning to see color differently and learning to use abstract shape to create realistic imagery. So now I am cutting out different chips of blue to create the sky. And I don't know if you are familiar with Van Gogh's Starry Night, but I'm not necessarily using the realistic colors from his painting. We are allowed to take as much creative license here as we want. Now that I have the rolling hills, the beautiful swirling sky, and the stars in, I'm going to focus on this form at the front. And I'm using dark shades of grays and blacks in the pieces I've chosen from the magazines. It's fun to use longer pieces to create that feeling of movement, combined with the smaller square chips of a more traditional Roman mosaic or tesserae form. And your hands can get kind of sticky, so it's good to stop every now and then and go and wash them off. As we work on this section, which is quite meditative in nature, I'm thinking forward to if I will do the houses of this or leave them blank for now. You can always come back to this project later because it is a more time-consuming project. And I think for this demo, we're going to leave it at this interesting form in the front of the painting and then move on to some other examples. I'm applying my last few chips of dark color, and it's always good to glue over the top as well. That can give it a bit of a glossy sheen. Now I'd like to show you a few different options that you can do with this torn paper collage technique. One of them is to use a pre-cut circle of any colored paper, and you can make basically a mandala out of colored paper. We've divided this circle into its various parts, and just with the different colors from the paper, I've created this really beautiful two-dimensional mandala, which can be easier than a big scene. And a lot of this work reminds us of Chuck Close, who is the American painter known around the globe for his hyper-photorealistic portraits of people. In his later years, he started using a technique where the underlying foundation of his painting was a grid, and he made tiny squares that made up each grid. Within each of these tiny squares, he painted some basic abstract shapes and colors. So when you look at his painting up very, very close, you just see what looks like abstract circles and squares of color. But when you move to a further distance from the painting, you see an illusion of a very realistic portrait. This is the same technique we can use here to get back to the Roman mosaic, where I've actually used a scissors to cut up square pieces like those ancient forms. And you create an image, again, using a pre-outlined template or a design of your own to create that illusion of a realistic piece of art.